we had a retro last week. If anybody has any questions about what was discussed there, feel free to send it to any of us. The biggest takeaways we're going to try to get meetings on the calendar sooner. That means you should expect to see less information, more just high-level topics and speakers. And with that, just there is the caveat of, with us making a rough timeline further in the future, just realize speakers and topics might change on the fly. Hopefully we'll keep it in the same vein if we can, but if not, we're going to apologize in advance. If you can't be at this meeting or would like to share it with somebody or want to check something out again, feel free to check out our YouTube. That's where we're posting all these. Today we're going to be have a topic with Javier on Azure DevOps. The May 4th meeting will be over Azure IAM. And then the 18th, Javier will give us a talk about managed identities. And then there's some free Azure learning resources out there. And then join our Slack. We just created that to stay more connected and hopefully have a more Q&A kind of conversation if you have questions or just want to ask to the general group or just have feedback that you want to tell us. Feel free to join that. It's in this meeting on Meetup, and then we'll send that out again at the end of the day as well. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our speaker today, Javier. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. My name is Javier Lozano. I'm sure some of you know me here from the Iowa.NET user group. I created a slide. Just kidding, I did not. I just typed all this in VS Code. So there's my name, Javier Lozano. There's my email. There's my Twitter. I'm also a member of the .NET Foundation. So I'm a board member there.
Screen, Javier.
Oh, I'm not. Yeah, because I'm just talking. So my apologies. You guys get to just see my ugly face and just rambling about nonsense. So I'm going to put that right there. Anyway, so we have a member of .NET Foundation, a board member. I'm also a co-founder of the .NET user group and the CEO, founder, whatever else you want to name for Lozano Tech, which is my consultancy here in Des Moines. I have several clients here in Des Moines and also national. So I haven't reached anybody international yet. So that's sort of one of the things to kind of check off the list on the bucket list. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about myself. I'm here to talk about Azure DevOps. So my intent with this presentation, so we have about 53 minutes to talk about some of the stuff. It's kind of to show and go through some of the features that Azure DevOps has. I'll talk about it on a very high level. I have some demos that I want to show, in particular from a developer perspective, right? So from a developer perspective I want to talk about builds and releases. Now, I don't want to talk about TDD. I don't want to talk about running tests or anything else, because that will vary shop to shop. I just kind of want to give it a high-level overview of what things are there. And then obviously you can run your unit tests as you build the pipeline. You can run unit tests before you release. You can do whatever you want on it. But I kind of want to share with you some of like what's there, what is nice, what is not nice of Azure DevOps, and kind of just share some of the things that I've learned by working with Azure DevOps for the past several years with different clients, with different setups, and it's all possible. It's just, what do you all want to do? So as I say that, this is not really me standing behind a virtual podium and preaching to you. I want this as a conversation. So if you see something that, hey, what did you just do there? Or what does that button do? Hey, we're trying that. Let's make that conversation. I'm here to kind of help you understand some of the pieces there. And obviously, if it's too much, I'll say, hey, let's take this offline and we'll discuss a little more. Okay, well, without further ado, let's kind of look at Azure DevOps. I have no slides. So I've done this presentation several times, and I'm just kind of going to talk about the different features, and I'm going to kind of start at a different high level, and we can discuss all the fun stuff that's available there. Cool. Awesome. So there's some Azure there. If I go to dev.azure.com and I go to Lozano Tech, everything you see here, / that is your organization. So as you can see, I have two organizations. I have Lozano Tech and I have Geekshare. Geekshare is sort of a playground that I can keep there, and I can do some other things. I have some different projects, as you can see on this dashboard, and I can probably zoom in a little more. You can see it. And this allows me to configure everything that's available out view everything that's a high level for my organization. Down here, we have all the settings. I can literally do what I want. I'm the master of my own universe when it comes to these settings. All of this you can go out and create for free. Absolutely zero charge whatsoever. Now, I'll put an asterisk to that because even though it's free, you're just like anything, you're limited on what you can and cannot do. Okay? So what does that mean? That means that, hey, my build takes a while. Yeah, because you're using the free shared environment. If you were to pay for it, which is negligible, then you can have more GBs and more CPUs to be able to kick off the build. But if you're a small team and you want to try things out, it's definitely a great way to look at it. Before, as some of you were joining, I was talking with Jacob Meisel, who I've worked with in the past, and he said he just spent about 1.5 years since they moved into Azure DevOps. I have a client about 1.5 years ago, even though it all seems all blurred because of 2020. We were actually moving from, they were using Bitbucket for source control management. They were using Bamboo for their build server, and they were using Jira for their task, or like rundown and sprints management and everything else. We moved everything that they had there and a price tag of maybe about $5,000 to $7,000 a year for a small team of 5 people to Azure DevOps. And I say move asterisks because we're still moving some stuff just because other projects priorities come up, because it always do. We moved it to Azure DevOps, and right now I think they're paying $45-50 a month because they kicked up some of their features that they have. Also, because they're in Office, they're in Microsoft 365. I keep saying Office 365, even though it's no longer called that. Or maybe it is still, I don't know, depending on which circles you're in. They're already in Azure, so they're using Azure AD, which allows you to essentially, if I were to click on organization settings, and I look at users, I have just me as myself in here, but I can actually add users. And as I search for users, it will actually allow me to, I'm not sure if you can see it, it's kind of grayed out of here, search my Azure Active Directory. So I can actually connect that Azure Active Directory to my Azure DevOps instance and have it be the same thing. This has come long ways from what it used to be, so that way it's a lot more seamless in ability to interact those two pieces. Now, the cool thing about Azure DevOps is that you get 5 free users that get to use it out of the box, and that is like full functionality. As you can see here, there's different levels. There is a stakeholder and there's basic. Stakeholder is more like, I hate to say it this way, but more like a BA or project management. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that is like they're not there actively touching builds, releases, or whatever, right? They're more there on managing the project from like, here's a task, here's a story, here's an epic or whatever, right? From an agile management perspective. So that's what a stakeholder is. And then basic is you have access to all the functionalities. Now there's Visual Studio Subscriber, which means that if your organization has Visual Studio licenses for you, whether it be Pro or Enterprise or whatever flavor you have, it actually, you can select that. Now you have to log in using the Microsoft account that has that, whether it's a public Microsoft account as in like a public MSA that you have, or as part of your Active Directory for organization, that works as well. But that actually doesn't count against your licenses. So a good example of that, this client I mentioned, we were migrated over to Azure DevOps. They do a lot of work with subcontractors as well, and also with my organization. So all of my people have Visual Studio subscriptions, even though they had the 5, and I added 3 people to work on some of their stuff. It never dinged their account. So there's a plus with that. Anyway, that's cool, kind of high level from that perspective. So if you're having trouble selling this to an org, to your org, or you want to kick some stuff out, you're more than welcome to, to kind of look at those things that you have in there. I created a project, so everything outside of Azure DevOps has a projects. Projects are a blessing and a curse. I like the fact that they're there in one specific spot, and you do something, and that doesn't affect project. It's like, say you do something in this DevOps demo or project A, doesn't affect project B or project C. The curse is that if you want to share something between project A and project B and project C, is almost next to impossible to do it unless you use Azure or something else, like if you have Key Vault or something that you want to share. But the thing that stinks about it is that you're going to have to configure each individual project. There's not like, hey, here's this global thing that I could share across 3 out of my 5 projects or 6 out of my 10 projects or whatever that is. I went through here and I used all the different features or the different things that you have. Overview is great because it kind of tells you like, here's what this is. It's kind of lame when you look at it from this perspective, but in some other clients, we've actually created this as like a crazy dashboard where you can actually find information of, okay, here's my rundown charts. Here is my build notifications or my build status. Here's what's been released. Here's the queue that's doing this. So you literally get here and you like, it's like you have all the information, right? It's like you're on the deck of a big ship and you're able to see all the knobs and levers and everything that's available to you. Now you can do some analytics view. I don't think I have this one configured. Yeah, actually you do have it. So this uses Power BI. So it actually goes through and analyzes all the data that you have and it can run basic reports. You can create new ones if you want, as you can see here. But you can then, this is the stuff that's available out there that you can run. There's a wiki. The wiki, you can use this out of the box if you want to by creating it, or you can say publish code as wiki, which actually will have a repo. So you can actually clone the wiki down, do manual commitments, and actually push it out there. So it's really up to you to figure out which way you want to go with it. Dashboards, repos, pipelines, test plans, and artifacts are all the other features out there. I like dashboards because they're simple, but they're very methodical in some of the things that you can do. Right, so what do I mean by that is like, you sort of have to understand that, okay, when I create a dashboard or I create a project, actually, which I should go back and show you, this is actually really more to the project than the dashboard. I can create a new project and I can actually have different types, if I can call it foo project, right? And it will just be added to my org. By default, they're all private, right? So if you're an organization, if I am company, Foo Inc., I want to make everything private, right? Because that's one of the biggest things that everybody complains about or has a kind of a naysay for the cloud. It's like, oh my gosh, it's in the cloud, anybody can look at it. They're going to rob us blind of all of our awesome code that runs a batch job to pull data from a mainframe or whatever, right? By default, it's private. If you make it public, then it's available for everybody out there. I recommend if you're going to do anything public, whether it be open source or whatever else you want to share, do it on GitHub. It's designed for that. In other words, GitHub is by default public, and you have to choose private. Azure DevOps is by default private. You have to choose public. So it's kind of like I would say the yin and the yang from that perspective. But one of the things you can do is you can choose different version control. If you're using Team Foundation version control and you like that, go for it. But by default, out of the box, it's always Git and it's always defaulted to Git. And then you have different agile process. Now, if you can see here, I have, different work item processes. And these are essentially templates. So what is the template? The template allows you to say, oh, I'm not going to call it a user story. I'm going to call it a widget or I can't think of anything. And that specific custom is going to have these fields and it's going to have this other stuff. You can customize that, but you can't go and customize any of these ones like Agile, Basics, CMMI, or Scrum. You're going to have to create your own. Like I went through and created my own called LCTK Agile, which is essentially my own flair on top of it, right? And what I did is I took the Agile template, cloned it, renamed it, and made some tweaks on it. So it's not like you have to start from scratch, right? You can do those specific things if you want. But anyway, that's kind of how that's set up. And the reason why I'm bringing that up because that affects your board specifically. So in here in boards, I can go through and I can create different work items. I have bugs, I have epics, I have features, I have issues, I have tasks, whatever, right? So out of the ones we use more often than not is the user story. I can go through and create the user story. The big thing that I did with this one, the minor modification is that you see sort of kind of how there's a different kind of layout for these things. Well, there's actually a component that is part of the marketplace. So just like Visual Studio has a marketplace, Azure DevOps has a marketplace, which is third-party components that are developed that you can use. Some of them are for free, some of them are for pay, based on that third party that they have available. I went through and I found a Markdown editor because I like Markdown. So then you can go through and use that. Otherwise, you get the one that comes straight out of the box, which essentially is you have the, the options up here to create whatever you want. Here's bold, here's list, here's whatever, and then you attach it. So as you can see here, let me collapse this. It's just a basic user story, right? What are you gonna, the fields are automatically generated and do some work the business wants, right? How many story points do I see that? That's essentially a 1-point story. What's the priority on it? What's the value case and so forth? So you can drive all of this through here. Now on development and related work, you can actually be from here, say, hey, I need to create, it's a branch because I'm doing everything in PR, or it's another code, or it's a pull request, or anything else that you want to link through in here, and associate those items, which is kind of nice because essentially in here, if there's one, there's masters. You can't create a branch from here. You can always link it to it. That's out there because they removed, I removed that piece of it. Before you can actually say, hey, no branch, create one from here. You can definitely do it as well. Iterations and areas, these are essentially, iteration is AKA my sprint. As you can see here, I've used this a while just for demos. I haven't updated since 2019 because pandemic. And again, I haven't done much presentation with this kind of level. So you can go through and create those items and associate them as need be. Any questions that I have thus far? Nope. Going once, twice, sold. Cool. So I'll just save the story. The moment I save it, I get a user story. I click on it. There's a direct link to it. I can see it, edit it. I can post this on Teams. I wonder if I can do copy. Let me bring up Teams again. And actually, no, not that Teams. The reason I was sharing that is because if I paste this in here and I paste it, oh, you don't have, I wasn't quite sure if they enabled that or not. There's actually a Teams app that you can actually add. So there's a Teams app that it links with Azure DevOps. So you can actually say @ or hashtag users, and it will say, it will start searching your Azure DevOps, and will say, oh, I want story 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you can tag it. So if you're having a conversation with your teams, you can actually say, here's what that is, and they click on it, automatically brings up the browser and it takes them deeply into it. Recently, I was working with a remote client where we were essentially, we had people in Central Time, majority of a Mountain Time, some Eastern, some Pacific, and it made our life a ton easier to be able to post that information on a team chat, be able to click on it, go back to it, because you can have threads and whatnot and actually trace all of it together. So it works really well that way. You have code, so there's a demo repo, there's stuff out there, you can do some of the work. This is essentially, you can click on history, see what was done. You can essentially browse through all the different repos and kind of associate whatever items that you want in there and be able to click on it. So like in here, you can see the history. It's a nice visible history of what's there. I can click on it and I can actually do the comparison, right? You can change it to be side by side or do an inline. Hey, this was added, this was removed. Depends on kind of what your size of your commits are, that it works well. So you can look at it that way as well. Any details, talks about when it was created. Was it part of a PR? Yep, this was part of a pull request that was essentially open for this code, and you have all this metadata in here. So I'm going to get a little bit soapbox here from the perspective of that if you have to deal with some sort of regulatory body for compliance or anything else, like back in the day, I used to head what we called quote unquote IT operations, right, or software operations for a Fortune 30 company here in town, that I had to deal with the SOX audits, which is a ton of fun, by the way. So I had to make sure that when the auditors came, we were providing that it was kernel mustard in the library with the candlestick, right? We had to provide all that, and if it was an emergency thing, why it happened. Our tools were all over the place. It was very difficult to find those things, to piecemeal them together. The thing I love about Azure DevOps is that it brings it all together. So you can actually see when it was done, that it actually did have a build. I can actually click on that and see what the build, when it ran, how long it took. And I can actually see, oh yeah, this was actually tied to a release that was deployed. So as you can see here, I can give someone access to this information to go look at it. They can actually see all the specifics. If I click on this, this actually tells you, oh yeah, here are the logs. Here's essentially what it tried to do. Here's the next tasks. Here's everything that run through it. And it's down to that very specific, or actually what happened there. So from my perspective, there's huge value on just that integration within itself. Now, having said that, the interface, the UI interface tends to be a little bit lacking on some aspects, which is okay because, you know, it's trying to be a provide too many different features to so many different teams, that some things it does well, some other things doesn't do well. For example, if you do a PR and you have to do a merge, right, it will show you that screen. It's like, hey, here's these 3 files that I can merge, or here's 10 files that you touch, and it's easy for us to do it. It's smart enough to say, hey, you did a commit, and it throws its hands up in the air and goes like, I can't help you with this merge because there's so many different things to it. What I recommend you do is I recommend you do this merge locally, because that way you can use whatever tools or whatever process, because for the UI, for this web interface to handle everything for you, it can get pretty crazy. So anyway, yeah.
It looks like we got a question.
Yeah.
How much do you use YAML pipelines with CI/CD in the same file versus separate release stages, which only really support visual configuration and are commonly used after visual pipelines?
Oh, wow. Repeat the question again. So it is about YAML pipelines. There were essentially 3 different things in there. That's what I'm trying to capture.
Yeah. It's in the chat if you want to reread it.
Oh, it's in the chat. Sweet.
Yeah. How much do you use YAML pipelines with CI/CD in the same file versus separate release stages, which are only really support visual configuration and are commonly used after visual pipelines?
That's a great question. So it really, thank you, Ethan, for asking that question. So how much do you use YAML pipelines? It's like, well, it really depends on the environment you're at. So back when I was saying that we had this remote client, we use pretty much all of our pipelines where essentially all defined in one big YAML file, which is next to impossible trying to navigate. And that was what the client wanted, because they wanted to be able to have one file, easily clone the application and do something with it. The release pipelines, configuration and so forth, I would say really wasn't that big of a deal, because it was all done via the, some teams were doing via visual configuration, others were doing via YAML. And it really, again, depended on the team. And more importantly, not the actual team, but the actual DevOps engineer, or SRE, site reliability engineer, that configured them. The thing that sucked for us, and maybe this is kind of where you're at, was that since we were using Docker and Kubernetes, or AKS, it made that ripple a lot harder, because now we have to update the Helm charts to be able to update the right configuration, link that to the releases, and it was just like you were in YAML hell, right? In my personal opinion, there's a special place where for YAML, because it tries to solve a problem, but it also tries to it introduces other things that are painful to people. So I'm not sure if I answered it. I'm just kind of saying it's like it really depends on kind of what you're trying to establish and what your development team can handle. More often than not, I show visual representations, because people are used to saying, oh, I click on this, I do that, and it all works, right? Rather than trying to be like, now watch me trying to figure out the YAML syntax for this specific task, because it might be different, right? Now, it does provide IntelliSense and so forth if you use it there, but if you're trying to edit the Azure-pipelines.yaml file locally, you may not have that same IntelliSense or the same information. Does that answer your question, Ethan? Yes, no, maybe? Yeah, okay, no problem. That's a great question, by the way. Thank you for asking it. Oh, hold on. I clicked on the wrong thing. I really just wanted to minimize this, not that, and I wanted to put you on up there in my other monitor. Anyway, so that's kind of how the repos work. Pipelines, as we were discussing here, this is a way you can actually go through and deploy the application. Essentially, you can, and the reason why I'm saying deploy is because the pipelines, there's two things. There's pipelines and there's releases. Everything else is a supporting aspect of pipelines. So pipeline essentially is the best way to look at it, is a build, right? But a release is also a pipeline, which is sort of weird. So essentially with a pipeline, you can say, hey, I want to do this specific thing. For example, if I use the YAML configuration, I can actually say, hey, here's my .NET application. I want to build this on these 3 different flavors of Ubuntu, if I wanted to, and I can configure all that in my YAML for my build. The cool thing about also pipelines for builds is that, say, for example, if I am running if I have an application that has both an API and a mobile app, so for example, an iOS application, I can actually say, hey, take this chunk of code, and in the same pipeline, when something gets committed, it could be looking at different repos, right? It could trigger something that's like, I want you to run the build for the iOS application on a macOS server or a macOS agent, and it will go and spin that up and set it up and everything. And at the same time, it can do parallel. It's like, hey, I want you to build and compile my .NET Core application or my .NET Framework application and do those things. And it's all configured within the pipeline or within the agent that you actually want, and it can actually be done based on stages. So you can say, hey, stage 1, here's run this, and after you run with that, run the other one, or run them in concurrently, whatever you want to do with it. In this demo, or at least in this pipeline that I have, let me go edit. This is where I built this using the UI because the YAML, when I was doing this demo back in 2018, 2019, the YAML stuff wasn't fully supported. You didn't have as many features as you would have now. Now, actually trying to get here is next to impossible because they're trying to push everybody to the YAML. But the cool thing that I like to show people about it is that you can actually configure different things with it. Like in this situation, let me zoom in a little bit so you can see what's possible. Hey, you make sure you use this NuGet, do a NuGet restore. One of the things that I like to do specifically for this, when you have larger teams and understand, more often than not, we sit there and try to answer the question, what the heck is in production? And the reason why we ask that question is because sometimes as teams, we don't do a good job of documenting. Like, how many of us do release notes, right? Should we? Yes. Do we make quote unquote time to do it? No. So all these toolings kind of helps you to get there. So one of the things that I like to do to sort of help with that, not necessarily to make it this is the way, but essentially kind of helps, like Hansel and Gretel drop those cookie crumbs to know where we came back, is use this is a third-party tool called Set Assembly Manifest Data. So one of the things that this thing does, and I'll zoom in here to full screen, is that it actually looks at the source of the sources directory. These are different essentially reserved environments or reserved variables that you can actually, these are build variables you have there. So I say, hey, for all the sources, look at the assembly info.cs wherever they're at. And one of the things that I want you to do is I want you to provide this information. So you can actually say Lozano tag copyright. We can say 2021. So what is going through? It's going through and actually editing these fields, and it's actually editing the CS file. So what does that mean? These are the one-to-one values in the assembly info.cs. So that means when I actually go build the thing, I'm actually injecting that build number into my assembly. So then I can query the assembly if I wanted to, or display something and actually be able to see it. So if I come down here and I look at this assembly version number, I was like, okay, what is this build number? Great, doesn't make any sense. Well, if I come over here and I look at options, one of the things that I can do is in my build format, I can customize my build number. So in here, I'm saying it's my major version, minor version, and then build ID. And these major version, minor versions are essentially variables that then I can create. So my major version is 1.0, my minor version is this. So as I'm going through and I'm creating these builds and I'm ready to cut those things, I can actually come in here and actually edit it, right? And actually say, hey, now we're doing 1.1 for this minor version, or 1.2, or guess what? We hit the big milestone. We're doing 2.0 now. And actually leveraging and using these values. So when I go through here in these options and I say, yep, my major version, minor version, build ID, essentially is going to track and trigger, append those values and assign it there for that specific build. So into my code file, then I build it. And then the moment I'm building it, it's like, hey, I want to publish whatever symbols. So any PDV files I want to push out there. So that way we can actually have the information and we can download it later if you wanted to. And then also I want to publish the artifact. And here's the application that I actually want to do. So this could be used by another pipeline, or it could be used by release to be able to take those values and push it all the way out. So any questions thus far? Nope. OK, for this. And again, you may choose your own venture. I'm not saying you got to do it this way. This is the way I found the pattern that works really well across different teams. And again, it's nice to visually edit some of the stuff. The thing that sucks is that for the visual editor is that you really can't, like, if I want to do something with it, I'm kind of screwed, right? Here's the pipeline. I'll say leave because I don't care about saving these things. I can go in here and I was like, okay, well, what do I do with this pipeline? You know, I can import one. And I can come out here and I can say, oh, clone. So it's a template, export to JSON, export a YAML. So if I wanted to export a YAML, you see it down here. It actually download it. Show in folder. Come on. There's a bunch of open with Visual Studio Code. Minimize that. Come on. No, not Docker. And here's what it does. Here's my variable names. Here's my faces. So essentially, remember talking about you can build with the job with different Mac OS. You can essentially our jobs do that. Here's all the different tasks that are available to there. So I can then take this, copy paste it, place it somewhere else into a different build, and I have all my YAML configuration. Otherwise, I was going to have to manually type all of this, which again, it's not the end of the world, but it's just like, okay, what was it? Is it lowercase ms and then lowercase b, or is that uppercase? You know, you kind of have to know all the nuances to bring up the bring up the documentation. Granted, only once, because you can then take that and export it or clone it. And the reason why that is because over here, if I come to this bad boy, let me close that. I can clone it and then rename it or change it, right? But this only does it for this specific project. So if I have project B where I have this information, I literally have to export it and then re-import it. Which kind of sucks. That's one of the things mentioned about blessing and a curse, which should have stuck between a rock and a hard place when it comes to some of these things. But as you can see in here, like heck, I just click on this, you can see, oh, I have 1.42. That is that build number that I was able to create. And my releases, which are also tied to it, I can come over here and actually say, hey, my releases, my options, my release name format, it's actually build number, and it's taking that same build number. So, and the reason why I say that is because more often than not, when someone creates a release, it's the default is release dash number. So it could be release dash 23, release dash 28. I'm like, trying to piecemeal that thing together is difficult. This way, at least you can know, hey, the build is also tied to the same release name, because we're humans and we're tackling multiple things, so it's easy to put these two together. There's a value there that you can actually say, hey, how long keep the settings for, and do the specific things that you may want. This one, some settings on this, you can actually change. So one of the things that you can do here, my apologies, let me close that, is you can actually change different app pools. There's obviously hosted, so run this job at this high-level app pool that is hosted by Azure. As I was mentioning, we had a remote client that it's actually running the pipeline, and they actually had their own agent pools of agents compiling it. So they created their own pool using a complete VPN. I think it was some mixture of VPN and some mixture with ExpressRoute behind the scenes. And the reason why they wanted to do that is because of they're HIPAA governed, and they're also SOX governed, because they deal with plan management for health insurance and whatnot. The thing about this is that when an agent pool, and you may have not know this, but when an agent pool in Azure DevOps is trying to say, hey, I need to go fetch this code, whether it be from a repo that is living in GitHub or a repo that's living there, it's actually going through the public internet. It's not going behind the scenes. Now it's secure, right? It's because it uses a Git key or credentials to go and fetch that and fetch information. Well, the thing about it, though, their whole thing was like, what if we have a man-in-the-middle attack and we have someone in there, somewhere between there and the infrastructure that Azure may not know about? So it was like complete secure, because it just made everybody feel more comfortable, right, from that perspective. But that's just a heads up that if you need that sort of level of configuration, you can definitely do it by using essentially a private agent pool. So for this one, I'll just set it here. Agent specification, and you can pick this one. You can say Visual Studio 2016 or 2019. More often than not, if I'm doing anything .NET Core, I'm just using Ubuntu, whether it be 16.04 or 20.04, because it doesn't care. The SDK gets downloaded and it gets compiled. Now, there's no extra cost for depending which agent you use. It's just whatever you want to use and kind of how you want to set it up. So then from here, you can actually, when you deploy the applications, you can go through and say, yep, I want you to use this description. Here's the name of the app. Here's the app service that I have available. Oh, this could be an actual deployed to a slot. Here's what that goes into, and blah, 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 whatever configuration that you may have on it. And kind of look at it that way. If I come back to, I'm going to say leave. I just did like we have this pool, I release using that same pipeline. So what I did is, like, if we look at this is why did it not merge in? That should be about an hour ago. Let me look at it here. Any questions when I'm looking at this? Oh, this is interesting that it showed that. Anyway, the releases that I was going to show here is that everything is just from a pull request, which I didn't do for this one, which I just literally did about an hour ago. I'm just deploying those tests. So I kick off the build was there, I created a release from what was there. And this, essentially, you click on it and it tells you, I'm spinning up this app service that is out there, and it's going to get pushed and available for everybody to see. And that actually app service is running out on Azure, obviously, and it's running out in the West US. So if I were to come over here and I were to click on app demo, I can actually look at the app services that I have available to me. If I were to click on deployment slots, because the one thing that you see in here, if I look at tasks, the pipeline, it got deployed to test, so it didn't go to prod, because that's a manual deploy. So this has CI built, so whenever I compile something and I create a build, it automatically triggers the deployment out to the test quote-unquote environment. And that test environment is nothing more than an app slot and an app service. So then if I want to just deploy or try something or try it side by side, I can actually just go to that specific app slot. So if I click on this gives me information. I open up a tab. And as you can see in here, app demo version 1.0 to 4.0. So literally that same value that I was telling you that was part of that build got shoved in all the way out, and it got deployed out there. And the code that's actually looking at that information is being fetched by using this code out in just my plain old MVC application. So we get the type, we get the assembly, and I get the name. So this tells me the name of the assembly. and I say, hey, cool, which will be the name of the assembly, which will be app demo, right? So give me that full name. Sorry, the name of the assembly app demo, and then give me the full name, which essentially has the version number, the public key token, and whatever else. And I just say, hey, just give me the version. And by the way, display it. So if I go to the index and I look at the view, yeah, assembly version that name, assembly that name is here, and the version is right over here. So again, kind of triggers and trickles all that information all the way down. The cool part about this, I'm not sure if actually I clicked on the wrong thing, is that if I were to come to the deployment center, to me, this going back to SOX compliancy and look at those things, this actually says, hey, on Tuesday, April 20th of 2021, you successfully deployed this. Here's the link to the code, here's the build, and here's the release that actually number that get triggered. So the name is actually released, whatever, 1.0.142, but it's actually release number 26. So if I click on this, because I have it all integrated, it takes me back to Azure DevOps where this actually the thing reside. So again, there's all that metadata associated with the deployment center that's available there. If I click on this, release 26, sorry, that's release ID. Yep, that's the one I just ran earlier today. So it allows you to be able to see that information. If I click on that, that is the actual commit of the thing that you added and you deployed. So from my perspective, this actually is great because it provides, all the soups and nuts that you may need to provide to someone down the road, whether it be someone internally, someone externally. That is really depending, obviously, on your environment. Let me talk quick about test plans. So test plans are interesting. They haven't done anything recent with them, which essentially a test plan right now, it's all sort of manual. If you do manual testing as in like, hey, run through this script, click on here, log in as that user, and annotate what you saw, that is essentially what test plan allows you to do. I'm not sure if it's in the roadmap or not, because they've talked about it multiple times, whether you're going to be using actually an automated test plan, because there's so many different tools out there that you can do. So I barely use test plans out there. If some of you out there use them, that's cool. I would love to hear what you think about them. But our experience, even when we were that large remote team, we actually never showed that. And it's cool because if you're never going to use it, you can actually click here and say team configuration. Sorry, not that one. Is it in this one? Sorry, down here. Overview, and you can say, hey, remove test plans because we're not doing any of it, or remove artifacts because we're not doing anything with it as well. So you have the ability to pick and choose. More often than not, literally what the configuration that I've seen for the organizations that I work with are either boards, repos, and pipelines, and maybe artifacts, or boards, pipelines, because they use a different artifacts management, or they use a different repo. Like one of the clients that I'm working with right now that we're going to be doing Docker and Kubernetes using AKS and so forth, we're only going to be using pipelines because their repos are going to be on GitHub and they have Jira as their board. So essentially we want something to use out there, and they're using pipelines because it's a little more robust and a little more close to home with what they want than, GitHub Actions. That's also their essentially equivalent of the pipelines, which also run on Azure. So there's that aspect of it. Artifacts, you can go through here, and in this one, I actually went through and created different, you can actually have your specific feeds. If I click on demo feed, I have a demo client, so I have a build that will compile a NuGet, that will compile a DLL and assembly, package it up as a NuGet package, and publish it out to a demo feed. What does that allow me to do? It's allowed me to click here, and if I click on Visual Studio, I can actually click on this link, open up the browser, and it will say, yep, here you go. Here's the feed. Here's what you can actually go through and query it. So then I can actually use Visual Studio and be able to reference that package, and it uses all the same authentications that I had before. So again, it's something that you can use, something you not saying that you have to use. The gotcha with it though is that I don't like is that you have all these multiple feeds. Well, if project B, and this is project A, needs an output from this feed, then it can't just easily reference it by just going through, oh, pick it from this other project. No, you actually have to have that connection feed and download it that way. It works. It's kind of tedious. What I would recommend in that situation is like, as part of your build, just say, hey, push to this other feed, which then you also have to configure because the service principal that might be running that build for you may not have access to project B. So it can get a little finicky if you're trying to quote unquote cross the streams from that perspective. So any questions that we may have? No? All good? So I have about 10 minutes. Would you like to create something from scratch? Not from scratch? I'll come over here and I'll stop sharing so I can just kind of look at the camera. Bueller, did I lose everybody?
Nope, we're here.
Okay.
It might be good to walk through creating something from scratch.
Right, exactly. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Just show something end to end, so it's
Yeah.
probably beneficial.
Cool, no problem. I will do that. I wasn't quite sure just because we only had an hour, and I know we try to get it close to it. So let's go through it. So let's go through the beginning of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to GitHub. So this is GitHub Lozano Tech. This is my GitHub organization out there. I'm going to create a new one, and I'm going to call this App Demo 5 because it's going to be a .NET 5 application. And I'm going to make this public because it's just a demo, right? So we can say demo for Iowa Microsoft Azure user group, right? And excuse me with all the typos because you guys are watching me type. So I'm going to just be typing left and right. So I'll create that repo. Cool. So there's my repo right there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit clone. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come over here. Let me know if you should be able to see Visual Studio right now or something, or now actually my Git bash.
Yep.
So I can actually say git clone. I'm going to paste this because I'm in here. And we'll call it, app demo 5. Boom, cloning. Change directory, app demo 5. I'm going to go say .NET new MVC and essentially create that application. And because I'm inside the app demo 5, it automatically names it based on that. So then I can do code period for Visual Studio Code, launch it to that specific thing. So essentially I'm saying Visual Studio Code launch in this specific project, in this folder, not project. Just a plain Jane application. I'll run it using the default debugger and .NET 5. I'm taking a drink of water since we have to wait for this to build. Come on. Do it. And I know it all works because I did it earlier today. Come on. All my extensions. Hey, you sure you want to update? No, not at this point. Please don't. Come on. Download it. There's the bin. Do you want to add them? Yes. Oh, it's because, yeah. Come on. Installing. Computing. Did you do it? No, let's try running it again. Sometimes the stupid thing hangs when it tries to install. Hey, here's an extension. That's what happened. Close browser. So yep, there's my application running on SSL. Right. So app demo 5. Yay, whoop-de-doo. It's going to make me $1 million. Right. I'm just going to stop the debugger. So what I'm going to do over here, I'm going to come to app demo 5, git add -a, git commit. -m initial source commit, right? And git a push origin main. So I'm just going to do it all in one line because YOLO. And I know it's going to work. So we push this out to main. It's out there. Whoop-de-doo, I refresh this, and ta-da, all my code is there. Whoop-de-doo, get it works, right? So let's come over to releases. Actually, over here, and let's go to pipelines. Let's create a new pipeline. I'll go and create a new pipeline, and I want to use GitHub. I'm going to put Derek up here. And hey, which repository you want to do? Now, one of the things I already have gone through and set it up, I already set up a link, a service management link between my Azure DevOps and my GitHub, because they're different services. So we use OAuth to exchange those claims, so that way Azure DevOps has a token that represents access to GitHub, right? It could have been Bitbucket, it could have been whatever you wanted to. So if I click on here and I say app demo 5, let's select all repositories. Because it's under Lozano Tech, it's no longer under my JG Lozano, which is a different organization. I can click on it and say, yep, what do you want to do? You want to configure it. Hey, by the way, you're going to be installing this GitHub app because it's going to have access to it. Which do you want to have access to this? It's like, yep, I don't care about that one. I just want to be able to have access to it. So this is GitHub saying, you're approving this application that it's going to go through and query metadata from GitHub. Going to ask me to sign in, quote unquote. I already signed in. It's using Azure. It's essentially exchanging all the tokens, and I'm going to say, yep, I want to create a starter pipeline. Cool. What do you want it to look like? Well, I already cheated, and I already have the pipeline. I actually have it over here. So let me copy and paste this, just because of the interest of time. So let's go look at it. And I hate the way it does this. Let's kind of look at it at a high level. So this is all YAML, right? So this is the default thing that's there. This is off the main branch. So it will only trigger when there's commits to main. I'm using Ubuntu latest, whatever version is out there. I created these variables that can be shared across be aware as part of the application, which is essentially my build configuration, where my demo works, my app demo, CS branch, which I want to make sure in here. Let me do Explorer. Okay, so there's no subfolder. So we just need to do that. That's the project path. So look at that project. That's the name of my artifact. By the way, I want you to use .NET 5, whatever subversion that is associated with it. I don't care. Don't pull any release versions. This is the task using the .NET Core CLI. So this essentially is me saying .NET build, .NET run, .NET deploy, .NET publish, whatever, right? Whatever thing I wanted to. So in here, I want you to run build. I want you to build for release configuration, which is that variable I have up here. There's the name of the project path. So it's specifically that project. Sorry, my apologies, team, for going up and down. And I want you to display .NET build this. So this is what you will see as the actual build runs. There's the publish. So run .NET publish. Publish the web projects. Here what it is. I want you to shove everything to an artifact staging directory, which is provided for me out of the box by Azure, by pipelines. And I want you to zip everything up. So I'll be actually creating a zip line. Then once I publish that information, and essentially it's a consumable application, then I actually want to be able to create an artifact. I want to create something that then Azure DevOps can say, hey, cool, this release created an artifact. I can do something with this artifact. I can publish it. I can explode it. I can do whatever I want to, right? So I want to be able to say publish artifacts as a display name, and then I want you to, the source is that build directory, which is where I'm publishing to. And the name of the artifact name is the same of app demo 5. Cool. I hit save and run, set up CI pipelines, good enough for me. So what this will do, wait for it a bit. So this actually, excuse me, if I go to pipelines, it created by default, it creates whatever the name of the GitHub repo when using this. So it'll be organizations.name of the repo. If you don't like that name, you can easily change it and put it under. You can actually, where it says move or whatever else, you can actually create subfolders and structure your pipelines that way. We did that because we had some builds that only created different configurations of Docker images. So you can do that as well if you wanted to. So if you look at it here, I click on the pipelines. Let me click this. Here's my job, which is cleverly called job. I check out the code. So it goes out and gets all the code. It goes through and it makes sure that it has the latest version of found .NET 5.202. Do the build this application, and created this thing, created the release, do a publish, do all that, dump it into my output home/s. And then take that information and publish it, create me an artifact that is actually available there. Pretty cool. So if I click on here, if I click on related, that's the artifact that it built for me. It created that zip file. But then it could be taken and done something with it. All right, so cool. Let's go create a release now. I'm going to click on here in the release. I'm going to create a new release, the new pipeline. And this is going to be all UI driven rather than actually doing an YAML, just because of interest of time. I hit apply. Yep. And I'm going to call the stage name of just deploy because I already did the build over there. I'm going to close that. So in here, I'm going to select an artifact. I'm going to select an artifact and I'm saying, yep, I want an artifact from this project. I can pick from different projects, this is one of the few times that I can actually do that. My source is going to be the Lozano Tech App Demo 5 build. It's going to be the latest version, and I'm just going to call it App Demo 5 because that's the name of my artifacts. So it says artifacts published by each version of available deployment in the release pipelines. Latest success from that is published to this artifacts, App Demo 5. Boom. And here I can do continuous deployment. So if I want to deploy to dev, every time there's a new build, I can do that. I can literally just click that and it gets enabled. I can do filtering. It's like, hey, only do it if the build contains this information, or do a branch. Only do it if it's a pull request, whatever flavor that you want to be able to apply on this. It's all doable. So we go through here. I'll go to click on the deploy tab. And the deploy task. Now, the thing here is that this is the high level task, and here are all the jobs that are associated with that specific tasks. So one of the things I'm going to do here is this is at the task level, at the governing of all the different jobs that are underneath. Sorry, it's at the job level, not at the task level. My apologies. So anything that's underneath that job can reference these values, or you can link them back to something. So in here, I'm going to use an already existing Azure connection, which is essentially Azure Demos. I'm going to say, yep, this is a web app running on Windows. So I created this web app on Windows using .NET 5. However, I used Ubuntu to compile it and do it. And now I'm going to deploy it to Windows because it's .NET. I can click on this app service. Come on. And I can actually search for LCTK. Come on. LCTK UG. Come on. LCTK-AZUG. Perfect. There we go. So then I come over here, and this is just the HTML for it to do it. It's going to say, yep, your deploy app service using Azure Resource Manager. We're using this description. We're doing this. We're going to that app service name. We can configure other things in here. Transformation. If I want to pull values from a variable name, I can, or from an Azure Key Vault, definitely do that. I can configure all those things. I can do whatever I want. I hit save. Yep, that's where it sits. And I can come up to all pipelines and new release pipeline because I didn't name anything else. I create a new release. I want to be able to only run the automated trigger. I'm deploying this build because that's the default. I didn't touch anything and didn't configure anything. I'll create a release. So now it's release 1. I can click on deploy and hit deploy. So this will actually go through and queue up that job on an agent. And if I come look over here in Azure, go to App Services, I'll look at, where did you go? It's not there. There we go. LCTK-AZUG. There's all information for it. Let me compress that. It's out there. It's getting configured. It's going to be doing that. There's no sharing of keys, anything else, because it's been done behind the scenes by Azure DevOps. It's doing an actual deployment. If I click on Deployment Center here, because it hasn't fetched all the information, it's still saying, hey, what's your source control? How is this thing managed? You know, because there's no connection on it yet, because this guy is still trying to build. Was still trying to deploy. So it's going behind the scenes. It's saying, yep, here's my Azure. I'm getting the settings, getting the information, updated the settings, and Kudu is the backend system that Azure DevOps uses. Package deployment using zip deploy. Take this, deploy it, run from the package, pushes to www read only. Well, actually, it makes it read only because it's just essentially it's just content at that point. And the reason why it's running a little bit low is because I'm sure you've seen through the entire presentation, pipelines in your region may be impacted by a live incident. And it's funny because you click on it and you're like, oh my gosh, there's an issue. And it's actually only dealing with macOS apps. So,
does that ever go away, Javier? In my experience, it's almost always bannered there.
It doesn't. It's one of those that you can't. I wish you could close it, but I don't know why. I think they're just sort of, from my perspective, they're trying to be proactive, saying, "Oh my gosh, everything's running slow," but at the same time, it will freaks the hell out of you because like, is something wrong with my build, right, or something with my releases, right? So it's kind of a blessing and a curse. Before, I will tell you this: back in the day, this is a ton better. Because there were times where like, crap, why is my build failing and everything else? And I know a couple of the people that work on Azure DevOps, and I'm pinging them. It's like, hey, what's going on? It's like, I don't know. Let me check. It's like, oh crap, there's issue with the build agents. So like they didn't even know because it was so intermittent. So this is better than the alternative that I went through. So I guess that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, proactive is usually better.
Right, so if I click on this, give it a second, and I click on it, that is literally app demo 5 that just got deployed. All from soup to nuts. And I went through it rather quickly just because we were way over time. But this is the stuff that you can easily do and get it deployed out there in Azure. And if I were to click back on this, give it a second. Yep, it's still trying to fetch the information. So just like I showed you on that demo 1, and we were looking at it like, here's the metadata and everything else. This will eventually sync here. It's still trying to get all that metadata. That's why you installed that Azure Pipelines app to be able to query that information and aggregate it all for you. And that is it. I know I kind of went all over it very fast, and I saw we lost some people because of time, but hope that whoever remained, they enjoyed it.
Alec, I'll go ahead and stop the recording. So if anybody wants to have any more questions, then they can ask off recording.
Okay.